evening. I call to order the October 10th meeting of the Town of Berthoud Planning Commission. It is the tradition of the Planning Commission to start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance, so would you please stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, may we please call the roll of the Planning Commission?
Commissioner Pond?
Here.
Commissioner Filio?
Here.
Commissioner Hoffmans?
Present.
Commissioner Sigmund?
Here.
Commissioner Semadalis?
Here.
Vice Chair Smith?
Here.
Chair Anderson? Absent.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will move to the first, or technically the fourth item of the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from the September 11th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. Do we have any edits or comments on the agenda, on the minutes from that meeting?
Nope.
If not, I would entertain a motion regarding the minutes.
So moved. I second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the September 11th minutes. And we will now take the, what's it called?
The roll.
Take a vote, take a roll. Sorry, you're stuck with the scientist tonight, not the lawyer. I'm not as good with the Robert's Rules of Order as Karen is.
You're doing great. Commissioner Pond? Commissioner
Yes.
Pond? Great. Commissioner Filio?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffmans?
Yes.
Commissioner Sigmund?
Yes.
Commissioner Semadalis?
Yes.
Vice Chair Smith?
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. And let's see. Now we will move to the substantive part of our agenda tonight. Tonight we will review proposed changes to Chapter 30 of the Town of Berthoud Municipal Code. And we will start with a staff presentation, which I believe will be Anne.
Thank you, Chair Smith and members of the Planning Commission. So tonight, I do want to introduce to you and remind you, we have Erin Bagnall. She is with Sofer Sparn Architects. Did I pronounce that correct? And Erin helped us with the design chapter. She also helped with the Mountain Avenue overlay chapter, and then the separate design standards and the separate Mountain Avenue overlay district standards. There was a big labor in that, removing design standards out of the code, getting them into the appropriate standalone design guidelines, and then making sure other areas of potential conflict in the code didn't conflict with these standalone guidelines. So huge work to Erin. Also in the design guidelines chapter in the architectural standards, a lot of discussion was held there with Erin. So when you get to those portions, if we have any questions, I'll be asking Erin for some help and assistance with explanation there. Also, Ton Hillenbrand, the planning manager, and Bella Manzo, the town planner, were instrumental in seeing all of this through, as was Alicia Garcia, who is a town attorney, and Aaron Smith, the town attorney, helping all of this through. We started working on this code rewrite last year at this time, and we are so happy to be here tonight. It has consumed a lot of time, and staff, with all of the assistance from Aaron and Alicia, we're really pleased and proud of the product that we're bringing to you tonight. So again, we're bringing a complete repeal and replacement of the Town of Berthoud Land Use Code, which is Chapter 30 of the Municipal Code, to you. Mountain Avenue Overlay District amendments to you. as well as the design guidelines. So overall, the town of Berthoud is really lucky. We have an amazing comprehensive plan that was developed in 2021. It started in 2019. It did receive an award by the American Planning Association. It was developed before current staff was here, so huge kudos to Administrator Kirk and the planning staff that was here at that moment in time, all of the planning commissioners, the town trustees, and the citizens of Berthoud that participated in that plan. That is a guiding document that is then used to inform how we change the law or the regulatory document, which is the land use code, and how we change that. Oftentimes it takes several years to implement and to get it just right in the land use code. And quite frankly, a lot of the information was there. It just needed some reorganization and some polishing to make sure that the intent was clear. Some of the components were in the definition section, and so we were actually regulating from the definition section of the code. So we've taken those regulatory elements out of the land use code definition section, and we got them in an appropriate section. We've restructured, we've reorganized so that things make a little bit more sense and they flow more easily. When there was an opportunity, we've streamlined language, standards, requirements were consolidated to make it more simple and clear. I'm 100% sure that there are still punctuation and spelling errors in this document. We tried to catch them all. It's not going to be perfect, and we'll continue to catch them. Tables and sections are referred to by name 80% of the time, rather than by a section number. And this is to make sure that as the code changes through time, if in one place we reference a table by a table number, and then that table changes and we didn't catch it, then there's that immediate conflict. Every land use on the land use table now we've made sure is defined. Likewise, if we have a use that's defined that we want to have in the town of Berthoud, we made sure that it is on the land use table. We've gone through and we've consolidated some of the land uses. Like we used to have senior housing, nursing facility, other congregate style housing. We've all now grouped together with the help of our town attorneys. Assembly, for example, we've now broken that into different types of assemblies so that we can have smaller assemblies in different zone districts, the medium and large assembly areas, such as a church. And we've looked at different areas in Berthoud where that is applicable. Electric vehicle charging stations, we have to have some code ability to have EV charging now per state statute. And Bella worked with representatives from the state regulatory authority on EV charging to make sure our code would be current. We had about 6 months to a year to get it right, and we just decided that we're just going to do it. We're going to do it now, and then we don't have to do it in a year. And then we reorganized sections, and then we also reorganized within sections. So while the clean copy of what you have doesn't show all the reorganization, the clean copy you have highlighted in yellow substantive changes. You also have the red line copy that is a giant mess that shows everything that changed except for when we moved things, because there's no way to track movement. We wanted you and the public, for full transparency, to be able to see all of that movement and all of the content and language change. Again, the clean version shows the substantive changes after the reorganization and polishing. No other substantive changes were made. It really truly was a labor of reorganization and polishing. So let's get at it. All right. The new section 1 is general provisions. We currently do not have a method of amending our comprehensive plan in our comprehensive plan. So we went ahead and added an amendment procedure in this code. And that amendment procedure is going to follow the same procedure as a neighborhood master plan because they are somewhat similar. They're conceptual. Again, that comprehensive plan is a vision, so is that conceptual neighborhood master plan. So we made them mirror each other. If you want to make an amendment to the comprehensive plan, if a member of the public wants to do that, now we have a process to do that. There's a section that was clarified to reflect when vesting starts. In the state of Colorado, vesting is for 3 years after recording of a site-specific development plan, which is a use by special review or a final plat. So we've cleaned up intent there on vesting. And then there was a section that was clarified for non-conforming uses. A non-conformity might be a building or a use that was permitted in the 50s that would no longer be permitted today. And so it could have been it could have been legally permitted or illegally established. And we don't get into legal or illegal in the code. That's something that our attorneys lead us through. But we clarified that nonconformity chapter or section in the code. And then again, we did add a definition of a data center. Right now, the town is silent on data centers. If we don't recognize it in our code, it is not allowed. However, we looked at some of our manufacturing and processing and research and development. It could have been interpreted in a creative way to be seen as a data center. So we went ahead and added a definition of data center. Our intern Lakin Dixon helped us with that. And we're saying if you want to do a data center in Berthoud, it can only be allowed through a use by special review, which is a public hearing process in the heavy industrial zone district. Now, data centers require a lot of water, so I don't believe a data center would come to Berthoud because of that heavy water requirement. However, if somebody did want to come to Berthoud, at least now we have a process and we have a location where they would need to go. All dwelling groups are grouped together instead of single-family dwelling in the S section, multifamily dwelling in the M. Now it's dwelling, comma, multifamily, dwelling, comma, single family. So every type of dwelling is in the D section for dwelling. Addition of the electrical vehicle information per state statute. And again, the group care facility now eliminated several definitions. So no longer will we have a separate, like a safe house or senior housing or a nursing facility. It's all grouped under that group care facility. So that completes the section on general provisions. What I'd like to propose tonight is as we go through these high-level substantive changes per section, if you have any specific questions, let's talk about them per section. Is that okay?
Yep.
Do you have any questions about general? Okay. Moving on to annexation, impact fees. So impact fees used to be buried at the very end of this chapter, so we've moved it up front. And the definition of accessory dwelling unit in the impact fee section now matches the definition of accessory dwelling in our definition section, which we just went through in the general. And then there is new cash in lieu clarifications that have been made by our town water attorney for that cash in lieu dedication section. And that is found in section 30-2-113 on pages 6 and 7 of 15. Do you have any questions regarding the impact fee section of this chapter. Okay,
I do, I think.
okay.
I'm looking for it right now. But there was a section that talked about impact fees, I believe. I think it was in this section,
Mhm.
where the impact fees could be more if the town decided them to be more, but it had to be in writing and all that kind of stuff. No, I take that back. If it were less, if they were getting a reduction of impact fees, there had to be some justification in writing. That was documented. I don't know if it was in this section. I think it was this section. But what I didn't see there is if you're gonna document something for giving them a reduction, shouldn't we do the same for, if we're gonna charge them more, the town says, hey, we're gonna charge a higher impact fee for whatever reason. I didn't see that wording that way.
So every year with the budget, we adopt a fee schedule for every year, and that fee schedule is what governs our impact fees, our application fees, all of those fees. So as staff, we don't have the ability to lessen or raise impact fees unless they're adopted with the budget.
Okay,
So I
it's
think
all
we've got them
within-
covered. Yep.
Okay, good.
Are there any other questions?
It may be just a stupid one, sorry.
No.
You, on this slide, you mentioned the definition matches, but it seems like you've gone to great lengths to make sure there's not things in different sections that could get updated in one section and not the other. Was there a reason you decided to repeat this definition in two different areas as opposed to just leaving it in one and referring back to it?
Our water attorney wanted it here, and I did not have the stamina to argue.
Fair enough.
So he just wanted it here. And one of the reasons why is because we do require that half of a water right or an SFE to be dedicated with an accessory dwelling unit. So I think that there was a desire to have that definition linked there. And yes, eventually that would be nice to have it just in one area.
And in general, you've tried to do that with this cleanup, correct?
Exactly.
This was one that struck me you didn't. I just wondered if there was a reason.
Exactly. Now, wireless communications facilities chapter and oil and gas chapter, they do have some separate definitions. However, it's very specific to those industries. Yes, but you're exactly right. We tried really hard.
Thank you.
Yep. And it wasn't like a drag out boxing match or anything. Yes. Okay. Ready to move on? All right, so annexation. The town attorney scrubbed and clarified a substantive change we did make is that we clarified because the town trustees would like to see more information presented at the time of annexation regarding the fiscal impact analysis. And so the language that's included on page 3 in section 33-103A11 states that the economic impact to the municipality of the proposed annexation is included in the annexation assessment report, including the financial impact services provided by the town, as well as those provided by special districts. The financial impact shall include the impact at the time of building permit with the payment of impact fees, annual tax assessments, average tax per household, median household income, for example. These impact statements are understood to be estimates based on expected revenues and costs at the rates at the time the report was prepared. So again, the town trustees are looking for more information on what the true impact of a development has on the town's ability and special districts such as school, library, fire on providing service to a new development that's coming to the town. And we're going to continue refining that as time goes by. A lot of communities struggle with how do we define what the true impact of growth and development is on a community, and we haven't found that secret recipe yet. So Commissioner Sigmund, we might ask you what's been done in communities, and you might have some information that you can share with us as well next year when we look further into this. But we'd love to know that true impact, as true as we can get, to communities on annexation.
So, yeah, and about this, so the onus would be on the applicant to provide this estimate? Okay.
Yeah.
I am curious how they go about getting that information when it's dependent on like the school district or the, water
Well, and some of
utilities.
it is based on that mill levy assessed by the county.
Okay.
And so that would be the annual property taxes and that division of the mills and what that mill levy might be. And then some of it is also going to be based on the special assessment at the time of building permit. And then what is really difficult to account for is then based on the income of the potential income of a potential resident and their potential spending patterns in the community. How do you quantify that? That's really difficult. And so there's some discussion of getting into that granular level, and I don't know how to do that yet. And so we're trying to figure that out, and that's a 2026 project we're going to work on. But those are some of the questions that we're getting, and this is the first step of trying to understand a little bit better.
So is there like a checklist that you go through to try to address each one of these potentials? And even like with the revenue piece, right? You know, an estimate of how much those homes are, and maybe you kind of extrapolate from there what the income might be for that, or the median income for that kind of, I guess, house value, stuff like that. I mean, is there, so like, when we expect the developer to come back with that, are we saying, hey, did you address this, that, the other thing, like this checklist?
So there isn't necessarily a checklist. However, there are two good examples. One, there is a developer in the audience this evening, and with a recent annexation that they prepared, they did provide some fiscal analysis. And with another development that was done, River Trails, they also provided a much more detailed fiscal analysis during their presentation as well. So we're going to take both of those and meld something together into that initial guideline for the development community, that this is what we're looking for with every annexation application, because that fiscal analysis is already a requirement, and we don't have that magic equation like the hydrozone analysis. You're going to see we have created that analysis in the or the little table, a cheat sheet table in the code now for the development community. We don't have something like that because this is something that could be difficult to come up with, but we are going to study it, and we are going to find out what it is that we really want, what data we really want to understand, and then probably reverse engineer what to get and how to get it.
Yeah, because I have to think that there's government reports out there that you can use as a baseline, as opposed to having everyone come up with their own kind of numbers. They may be wrong, but you have a baseline.
Exactly, and then
they're updated annually or whatever.
yeah, and then we're consistent,
Yes.
we're fair, everybody's following the same, and it doesn't become also an expensive analysis to the developer as well. Yep, so agreed.
So whatever the applicant engineers to figure out what size homes they want to build in a neighborhood, the town is basically going to try to reverse engineer that and extrapolate the information on the other end to see how that kind of income would affect the town and all the things that flow from it.
The developer gets to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, but
And I
we're,
guess I would add, I think it's important to know this is an art, not a science. I mean, there is no perfect, your slide is exactly, it's nearly impossible to really predict it. But you're trying to have a bigger than a bread box idea of what the impact is going to be to the community, both positive and negative as far as costs go. So
Yep.
I think there's some good examples out there, but none of it's going to be perfect. I mean, it just isn't.
Yep. And we all say, the magic words is development pays its own way. And reality is it never does. And so what is that true gap over the long run for the cost of development on a community versus what does a development bring to a community? So that's what we're going to try to understand a little bit better. Okay, are you done with annexation?
Yes.
Okay, now we're getting into something really fun. Zoning. Within our zoning chapter, we now only have 29 pages because we removed a lot of the design components of our zoning chapter and we put it in the design section or the design standalone design guidelines. So now our zoning chapter is purely zoning, which will be fabulous because what was confusing to the development community is you have to look in the zoning chapter to find design guidelines. You also have to look in the design chapter, and then you also have to look in these standalone design guidelines. So now this is purely the zoning chapter. Also, a huge labor of love from Bella is we used to have lots of tables in this zoning chapter, and these tables had, some of them had 20 footnotes. You can't, and some of the footnotes were regulatory. You can't regulate zoning by a footnote in a table. So Bella spent a lot of time cleaning up these tables. We might have one footnote buried in one table somewhere. However, we no longer have footnotes, which is fantastic. Let's see what else. You can see in yellow we've got the EV charging. And then we talk about the transition between different residential districts. So some of that density is discussed here. And then we also talk about that in the design section. We talk about the maximum density of units per acre. So how the zoning tables used to say is the minimum square foot lot that you could have. And what we've done now is we've taken that minimum square foot lot. So these are minimums. And we've taken out a percentage, 25% of that minimum needs to go to open space and to streets. And so let's say you could have, X number of lots based on that former minimum square foot lot size per acre. We've now set a number of units. That came directly from the development community, that it was hard to get square footage of lots. They wanted to have a number of lots versus square footage of the lot size itself to get things to work. We've added maximum lot coverage as well because as some of the lots are small, we don't want to have the entire lot be impervious. We'd like to be able to have some surface where rainwater and groundwater can seep into the soil. And then there was questions about corner setbacks. And when is a lot a true corner lot? When is it not a true corner lot? We had lots of conversations about this. So we agreed that if a lot is adjacent to open space that is at least 10 feet wide, that lot is not a corner lot if that 10 feet of open space is preserved in perpetuity as open space. Then that lot can have, like, let's say a 5-foot setback versus a corner lot used to have like a 10-foot setback. So in essence, you're still getting that setback. However, we're recognizing that they already have a 10-foot setback from the sidewalk to the fence, and now they can just be 5 feet away instead of now being an additional 10 feet away. So that was causing a lot of consternation with the development community as well. So we listened to them and we made that concession in the table. Let's see what else. Those are all consistent throughout the tables. So that's it for zoning, and again, it's just tidying things up, removing strict design guidelines from zoning. We did not change any zoning districts. Oh, one thing in annexation and zoning I do want to point out to you though, is we have a zone district called T, or transitional. And several years, Berthoud allowed you to annex, and if you didn't quite know what you wanted to do with the property, you could zone it to T or transitional. And then within 90 days, you were supposed to zone it to something else. Well, Berthoud has a handful of lots that were annexed and zoned T, and previous staff did not follow through and require them to zone it to something else within the 90 days. So now we have these T-zoned properties, and some of them are actually owned by the town and some of them are not. And so it creates now an extra burden for those property owners now to have to go back through that zoning process and rezone those properties. So we would much rather have people, if you're going to annex the property, you should know what you want to do with the property. It provides more clarity, transparency to the general public as well on how that property is going to be used. So if you want to annex in Berthoud, you have to annex and zone it to something other than T. And once we get rid of all the T-zone properties in town, we will no longer have that transitional zone district either. So that's it there.
Clarification on the switching to a maximum number of units. So acre 43,560, it's 8 units per acre. You're at 5445, I guess less if you're going to do streets or et cetera. So you don't worry that you could have, there's no minimum, you could have a 2,000 square foot lot in there and then an 8,000 square foot lot. So even in the subdivision code, no minimum lot size, no minimum frontage, nothing like that. It's just total units per acre.
Well, they'll still have setbacks. They'll still have those bulk standards that they'll have to meet.
But like a lot width standard or any of that kind of stuff, is there?
There's still that.
Is that in the subdivision code?
Yeah,
then?
so no, that's in the land use table. So let's say the suburban residential zone district on page 17. There's a minimum lot width. So for a paired home, the minimum lot width is 20 feet per each. Or a suburban detached house, the minimum lot width is 40 feet. So you could have the flexibility of lot size, but you still have to meet some of those other bulk standards. Yeah, so you couldn't have a little 10-foot wide lot next to a 100-foot wide lot. You'd still have those standards to meet, but there is a little bit of flexibility in the maximum density then. Okay, you done with zoning?
So, are we calling the tree lawns or tree strips? I just, because I saw it.
They're now going to be called tree strips. And the reason why they're going to be called tree strips is because that's what the state is going to require us to be calling them. And little teaser for the next planning commission meeting is we are going to have a work session on tree strips. And in early 2026, Aaron is going to work with us and we will be amending our landscape code or not our landscape code, but our landscape design guidelines, to make sure that those guidelines, now that our code will be compliant with state statute regarding tree strips and non-essential turf, that our standalone landscape guidelines are so close. They're pretty water conscious that we will just go through and scrub those just to make sure.
Because I did notice, now I read the red line versions.
Oh my gosh, bless you.
Well, yeah, no, it helps you. But I did notice in there, it was.
Yes. Tree strips.
Lawns,
Oh, we still have lawns.
yeah, in the red line version.
Okay.
I don't know if it was changed in the final version. I didn't do both, but I read the red line. And it was I can tell you what page it's on. If you want it.
Well, we will make sure.
I think it's page 20. Oh, 23.
Of which section?
Page 23 of 42.
Of which section?
Oh, of the zoning.
Oh, zoning? Okay.
Yeah, I'm just going through.
23.
In where it says corner side back. Or corner setback.
Yep, there is one that's caught in the table. Okay. We will do a global scrub. If you're okay with us making changes like that, we'll do a global scrub to try to catch every lawn to strip.
I don't, I mean, it's not a big deal, but I know we talked about it.
Yes.
Okay.
No, we'll do that.
And then the other thing I noticed, and I think you referenced the tables and stuff, on page 21, where you talk about, see the landscape design guidelines. And we're not calling out sections or anything like that. I like that, because it's just so much more flexible. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Way easier.
Thanks.
That's all I have.
Another nuance, the attorneys feel like that we have the same, taking some of the design stuff out of the zoning code doesn't change the enforceability of it, and does it change at all the process you go through for relief from one of those? So if it was in the zoning code, what you would have had to go if you didn't want to meet that, is it essentially the same now in both of those?
Yes, because we're adopting by reference these guidelines, and so they mean exactly the same thing. Yep, but great question. And Alicia, if you're on, did you want to make a comment just to confirm what Commissioner Sigmund had to question?
Yeah, so it wouldn't change the enforcement. You could still enforce it as you would under the code.
Okay, shall we move on? Okay, subdivision and land use. So anything that needs a permit now, we have in one section. So we brought all of the subdivision and all of the land use into one area. There's a lot of yellow here, and some of the yellow is caused. We removed all of the separate criteria for approval from each of the different types of land uses. And now, instead of having separate criteria for approval, there is an intent statement that's a general statement of intent that every land use, site plan, special use permit, a minor subdivision, going to the Board of Adjustment, preliminary plat, final plat, every land use application in the town of Berthoud will have to meet these intent statements. And so the narrative materials that will come to the town will have to make these intent statements. A lot of these intent statements were already in there. They've just been clarified, and now they've been grouped together. So if they talk about connected streets, connected sidewalks, connected paths, They're all grouped together. They've been clarified. The language is all the same. So, for instance, like adhering to the vision established in the comprehensive plan versus adhering to the intent. And that is a language change at the direction of our attorney as well. So adhering to the landscape guidelines, adhering to the architecture guidelines, adhering to the engineering standards and specifications. So we're calling these things out by their titles, that you shall adhere to these standalone guidelines. So we have a page and a half now of intent statements. And then the vesting, again, a site-specific development plan is only a final plat and a use by special review. And so we have a section on that vesting, and that we list here the general procedures for land use. And one of the items in here is that if a project that doesn't have vesting doesn't proceed forward within 12 months, that the applicant has to start all over. So if a site plan doesn't proceed forward, they would have to start all over because that does not receive vesting. And then the applicant shall provide finalized documents to the town within 30 days. What happens is if final documents aren't provided to the town, we've had some documents sit with the town. There were some that were waiting for me when I arrived at the town that had been waiting for 3 or 4 years that had never been recorded. And so now we have these items that were approved that now the code has changed and they're no longer in conformance with the code. So now we have it in the code that if you don't submit within 30 days, then we've got a problem. Also with applications, it's writing in the ability for town staff, either the community development director or the town administrator, to waive certain application requirements. So let's say we have a downtown business. They're an existing building on a developed lot, and they're wanting to redevelop their property. It makes absolutely no sense to have a drainage plan, a grading plan, and a drainage report prepared. They're not making any changes. So we would like to be able to have the right to waive. Now we already are making some of those concessions, working with the town administrator to make sure that we are following the intent of our land development code. We would now just like to be able to reference a code section that gives us the ability to waive some of those requirements. We are also now saying that if after 6 months of the date of a staff report, if we have not heard from an applicant, that they start all over, that they withdraw their application and they start all over. And why we're doing this is, again, sometimes specs and standards guidelines change. We've had some applicants that have been in the process for, gosh, we have one applicant that submitted in 2018 and they're still in the process. Codes have changed, everything has changed. And every time that they're submitting an application, it's that the entire development is changing. So we would just like to go ahead and at some time you just have to cut bait and start all over. Also, a technical review meeting. Right now, our pre-application meetings, how we do things is we'll get a request that a developer would like to propose a development in Berthoud. We pull together all staff that has in the fire district, and we have a pre-application prep meeting. And all of us come together and we prepare for these pre-application meetings. In the past, these meetings had have been called technical review committee meetings. We'd like to call them officially a pre-application meeting. It's just a terminology change. But we do a lot of prep meetings before then. Then during the application process, if there are a lot of comments that come in, we would like the applicant to be able, or staff to be able to say, I would like to sit down with these technical reviewers, whether it be the school district, CDOT, whomever is reviewing an application, and town staff will arrange a technical review committee meeting so that the applicant is afforded the courtesy of meeting with everybody individually or everybody at the table together so that we can talk about some of the concerns in an application. Because if CDOT has a concern, our engineer has either the same or a differing concern, or maybe by everybody working together, we can hash out that concern and it's no longer a concern. So we'd like to try to be able to bring everybody together. Then there is a change to, we had a meeting with the development community. Let me back up. Okay, so in section 35-104, in our code, we had these tables that were pages and pages long of tables, because it would say your vicinity map, and then it would list everything that needed to be on the vicinity map in a table, and then it would say which phase needed the vicinity map. So instead, what we've done is we've just said, all right, you need to have plat and mapping products. And then in the narrative, this is the time where we've actually reversed a table and put it in a narrative format. It just took up so much less space. So now we've tableized what the requirements are, and then we've described what those requirements are below. It makes it a lot more easy to digest, and then that's the checklist now. And so we have one checklist for all subdivisions. And then you have the checklist, and then below the checklist is the description of what everything is. Then we've added an irrigation plan, and now we actually have irrigation plan guidelines that were developed with the state, that were developed with our landscape architect, and that were developed with our operations team, and our intern Lakin Dixon developed our irrigation guidelines for the development community. And then we're asking that neighborhood identity features, that we get some precedent images of those, and just instead of saying, hey, we're going to do a swing set, we'd like to know what the swing set looks like. Also then we've created these nice handy tables in here that shows people how to calculate the water that is required per the different types of landscaping. We were getting things that were all over the board, and so we're just put it right here. This is how you calculate it. It's easy, then it's going to be consistent for everybody. And our water attorney did make sure that we did this correctly. Then we get into subdivision types. In our code right now, there is a section that describes what these subdivision types are in one section, and then a little bit further on it goes into more detail about what these subdivisions are and what these types are. So we've stopped that, and we've now condensed those two sections, and so there's only one section that tells you what the subdivision types are. What we were getting from some developers is they were only looking at one section of the code and they weren't looking at the other section of the code. So now we give an option also on the preliminary plat, and we listened to what you had to say, and we listened to what the development community had to say. In May, we presented to the development community, and we presented the idea of, hey, let's have an administrative preliminary plat, and then go to full hearings on the final plat. And the comment received, and something that we didn't even consider, is from the development community, that's a bigger risk because they're expending a lot of financial resources and time to get to that hearing, right? And you don't know what the political climate is going to be on approving or disapproving subdivision. And so let's go to hearing on the preliminary plat, and then if certain circumstances are met with that preliminary plat, then go to an administrative final plat. And what we heard from the development community is incentives really aren't that important for most development, but time is, because time is money. The more time they can't excavate, the more time that they're not out in the field actually building, that time is costing them carrying costs for their investment that they've made in the land. So we listened to that and what we'd like to do. And then we also realized in working with our town attorney that unless you go to a hearing for a final plat, you can't be vested. So how do we work around that? So the workaround is that we're going to give a choice to the development community. If you are ready to go and you know you've got your financing on board, you've got everything ready to go, you can go to an administrative final plat. And in this subdivision chapter, it talks about how you can get to that administrative plat. And we listen to you all under what circumstances that administrative final plat could be. It has to be an exact mirror image of what you all saw and what the town trustees saw at preliminary plat. That can go to an administrative final plat with the caveat that it's a risk. Then the developer needs to know that there is no vesting. So what that means is that they have to start their construction within a year, or else they lose that potential. Now we're also not going to go out there and say, it's been 366 days, I'm sorry, it's all gone. However, today's staff isn't always tomorrow's staff. So if you want vesting, then you need to go to a hearing. And what I've been told from the town attorney is the only hearing that can cause vesting is by the town trustees, not by the planning commission.
So would we have a final planning commission?
So planning commission wouldn't have a final plat hearing.
Okay.
It would just go to the town trustees.
And that's only if they're 100%.
And that's if they're wanting that vesting. So you wouldn't hear final plats anymore. It would just skip and go directly. If the developer wants vesting, that vesting has to occur by the town trustees.
What happens if they don't get vested?
Then they can have administrative final plat, and they just have to get it done. They have to start their development within the year.
Okay.
So if you have a small development, or if you have a big development and you're ready, you have your financing ready to go, you've got everything ready to roll, that's a risk that as a developer you have to take. However, we're providing that option. We're not going to mandate a certain way. We're providing that as an option, as that flexibility, because again, time is money, but legally we have to, if somebody wants vesting, we have to do it that way. And our town attorney, they really looked into this hard and fast for us because we pushed for this administrative option. And so they looked into that vesting, and lo and behold, final plat has to be vested by the town trustees, not planning commission. So
But again, that's just to start the project, right?
final plat, so you'll hear it at preliminary plat. If the developer wants to have an administrative final plat, it has to be an exact mirror image. It won't come back to you all, and then they won't have vesting. They'll have 1 year where it's good, for. And if they want vesting for that 3-year statutory vesting time, then they have to go to the town board of trustees.
And when they come in for preliminary plat, they have a choice at the end of the meeting to convert that to a final administrative, or they have to say that up front.
They can make a decision after they've gone through the hearings.
Okay.
Yeah, so they make a decision, hey, I'm gonna, there have been no tweaks, I don't wanna make any changes, my preliminary, and this is also why it's so important that the developer brings their preliminary plat that is squeaky clean to you all, that there are no outstanding issues, that there are no neighbors that are frustrated, that it is really clean, because then they have that opportunity to say, I got through the land use hearing process really easily, so I can have a decision here to make.
But they would come in as a preliminary plat. Anyway, it would be a preliminary plat review.
Any subdivision has to go through a preliminary
You
plat.
can't say up front that I want this to be an administrative final,
Correct.
but it's after that meeting, after the publication.
Yeah. Now a developer could say, hey, it's my intent
Right.
to have this be administratively approved. And if they know that that's their intent, a developer may choose to have, please staff, I'm begging you, please scrub my preliminary plat extra hard. Please take me through one more round of development review. And yes, we'll do that in order to allow, to try to get them to that spot.
I want to thank you for picking up the notes from this committee from a while back too, where instead of just having a no more than X percent, 5% change, you've said no change to the number of lots or density, which I think was something that was important to all of us.
Yep, and
I know
that
we
is,
won't see those at this point, but I think it is important
Right.
to the public that remain consistent.
yep, and I actually talked to Administrator Kirk about that concern that you all had, and he agreed that it would be 0. So that's a huge thank you to Administrator Kirk making that decision based on your input.
And so just to clarify, the developer would have the right to an administrative final plat as long as they meet these conditions. There would be no subjective decision based on the staff's judgment on whether or not they could proceed with that if they met the qualifications. of the
Correct,
code.
they're here.
Yeah.
This is what staff has to adhere to. There's no ifs, ands, and buts and wiggle rooms. If it doesn't meet, then they have to go to the hearing version of the final plat. Now, they could always decide, I really want that administrative final plat. I'm going to go back and amend my preliminary plat. They could decide to do that. There are lots of choices. We don't want to take anything away, but we want to provide these two opportunities and leave it up to the developer to make a decision on what their tolerance for risk is.
And the planning commission, more often than not, when we have an amendment on an application, it tends to happen in the neighborhood master plan phase. But in this circumstance, we could not have an amendment that requires a final plat hearing. Is that correct?
Can you say that again? I'm
If
sorry.
we were to get to the preliminary plat phase, the planning commission would not have the power to require, as an amendment for approval, that they have a hearing for their final plat.
No, you would not be able to make that a condition of approval.
Yeah.
Yeah, they, however, there, and it's very clear here, you shall do these 7 things
Yeah.
to get that administrative final plat.
So it takes out the whole idea of the planning commission making conditions on
Well,
No, we could.
we would, it would just have to be at the neighborhood master plan phase.
And you could make a condition of approval still with the preliminary plat. You could say, at the time of your final plat submittal, you shall do X, Y, and Z. However, there's probably not a lot of room then for that applicant to do an administrative final plat
They
then.
have to make a substantive change.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if it's something, is something like, you shall remove the proposed public art from the right of way. Versus you shall bring your neighborhood identity features into conformance with the requirements of the design standards. That's a little different. And so we're going to have a guinea pig that is going to we're going to have to test that, because there is a level of change. And let's say, and maybe I'm thinking out loud here, maybe what your condition of approval then would need to be is, prior to the town trustees hearing, you shall do these things. Which then is tough, because we like to pre-advertise those hearings, because it ends up costing the applicant a lot less. And it also expedites the hearing, because when you have to advertise, it's a 15-day gap. And oftentimes we'd like to try to get on that next hearing docket to help the applicant. So if we had a scenario like that, we may have to continue that next hearing, and then, we kind of get that domino effect. However, I hope, if it was that scenario that I said, removing the art from the public right of way, I hope that we as staff would have caught that.
I mean, I think the conditions you've put here have made it pretty tight. I think it's going to work really well, and hopefully as a win-win, as you said, it gives the developer a chance to move something along a little bit quicker. We don't need to see something that is essentially the exact same thing. We rely on staff for these changes anyway. So if there's a substantive change, it comes back to us. If not, it either is done by staff or the board, and I think that should work really well.
Yep. I think so.
Is there any conversations that have been had around how to actually refer to these stages going forward? I'm wondering if it's going to be confusing that the only public hearings will be the neighborhood master plan and the preliminary plat. I don't know, preliminary plat makes it sound like you're at the very beginning, and so this might give the impression that, you're much earlier in the process than you are, especially if the next phase is administrative.
So we would still give notice. The property would still be posted. If there were substantive neighborhood comments, staff can always make the decision to take something to public hearing, regardless of if it's administrative, even a site plan. If we're just getting a lot of public outcry about something, we can make that determination that we really would like to have the decision made in a public meeting. Okay. Early grading. Our town engineer would like to have early grading after submittal of a final plat, and and then after review of those grading documents. The town has been very generous in allowing grading to occur sometimes at preliminary plat, and that has caused a lot of problems because the grading is not finalized. So our town engineer has said, early release of grading is fine. However, it has to be at the time that the final plat is ready and grading is at 100%, those engineering documents. Okay, then moving on to Land use materials. So again, it really has condensed everything down. You have a table, and then you have a description of what all of the application materials are. Then you move on into land use. So it's describing what all of the different land use applications are. It provides some flexibility. Again, if there is an application requirement that is just onerous, we of course don't want to do that. We have a lot of redevelopment that's happening in downtown Berthoud, and in fact we had a meeting today with a property owner that's wanting to redevelop on Welch. Right now, per our code, they would have to do a full site plan, which would include a traffic impact study, grading and drainage, all of these specialized expensive studies. We have helped a CrossFit gym, we've helped 330 Mountain, we've helped some other businesses do what we're calling a site plan light with the approval of the town administrator, not staff just going rogue. However, now we'd like to be able to have code that supports that so that we can encourage businesses to redevelop properties. The same application materials for land use is the same application materials that we have for subdivisions. Of course, we're not asking for lot lines or anything like that. So you're going to see quite a bit of it is the same. We have added a plot plan in here. This has nothing to do with land use. However, it has everything to do with a building permit. And our building community has been confused because of staff. We have been in the habit of calling a building permit map, the map that's submitted with a building permit, a site plan, and it is called a plot plan per industry standards. So we are going to stop calling it a site plan, and it is called a plot plan. We wanted to go ahead and put it in here so that it is very clear. There are plot plans and there are site plans, and there is a difference, and we are going to start using the correct terminology. Also, a plot plan is a requirement to apply for a building permit. We wanted that to be very clear. And then we also want it to be very clear that oftentimes a land use permit is going to be required before you even apply for a building permit. So another thing that's an outcome of our housing diversity study is a fast track permit process. And this is one of the quick wins that we talked about. So the first quick win was to expand the incentive program that was under Ordinance 847 from 2 homes a year for a nonprofit organization to apply for waiver of building permit fees. The town trustees did expand that through Ordinance 1355, I believe was the number, this summer to 10. And so the second thing on our list that we're striving to achieve here is to fast track site plans. Now we can't fast track by statute, annexation zonings, subdivisions, but we can fast track site plans. So this would be for multifamily or other developments that require a site plan that have at least 50% for affordable housing. And so that site plan process, and this language has been approved by DOLA, by the state of Colorado, and this just outlines what that process is. And we're going to have a guidebook. We're also going to have process diagrams for building, engineering, planning, on what the existing process is and then what that expedited process will be, because we have to do building permits, the development agreement, the engineering, and the planning all in 90 days. So Berthoud is different from other communities because we view duplexes as a use by right in our many zone districts. many communities require that to have a special use permit. So right now we don't require that. So we're very lucky for that housing affordability factor. Right now, the only thing that's required after a subdivision for multifamily is a site plan. So, and that is an administrative process, but we're going to try to make it even faster. And I do want to say on page 27 of your packets in section 5, accessory uses and structures, right now it's number 5. It's going to have a separate section. So we caught that today. And so accessory uses, this was something that was being regulated in the definition section and regulated in different sections all over the code, but now we've pulled it all together. So it will actually be 35-109, and then all the others that come after that will just be renumbered. Okay, Board of Adjustment. So one of the criteria for approval in Board of Adjustment, this is the criteria that I believe was a sticking point and a hard thing for staff, as well as a hard thing for the Board of Adjustment, and it is that hardship provision. A lot of communities in the county are very clear. Our code was a little wishy-washy, and we're just going to say that the hardship was not created by the actions of the proponent, that the applicant just didn't create the hardship, period. And that will be one of the criteria instead of everything that was in there with that. And this will help it be a lot more clear that they just didn't create it. And then all of our certification blocks, they were following the final plat, I think, were they, Ton? And so everybody had to look in the final plat section for the certification blocks, and some of the certification blocks were only specific to the site, to the final plat, and not all of the certification blocks were even there. So a lot of our development community were making them up, which is fine. However, we want to make it easy. So Ton wrangled all of the rogue certification blocks and put them into their own section. And that concludes the subdivision and land use section. Do you have any questions on that one?
Yeah, I got a question. So, a part of one of the substantive changes, there was a misspelling. As I reread these all, like if we have misspellings, does that have to go back through approval, or is that something that can be modified in the code?
No, if you'll send them to me, or you can tell me right now. If you're finding a lot, that's embarrassing.
I think it's 30, section 5, 105E4.
E4 under vesting final plat, not identical to preliminary plat.
Yeah, requests, I believe, is REQRUEST. Oh, you gosh. And
yes.
there's 2 of them in there.
Thank you. I tell you, when you read this for over a year, you become blind to things like that, and we do our best to try to catch them, but we need your help, so thank you. Okay, I've got it.
I had that one, I had tree lawn too.
Oh, we're going to scrub this whole code for tree lawns to tree strips.
I know.
Whoever
I've
finds
read
the
the
most
thing, so I
typo
figured
wins.
I'd
Thank you. And what's interesting, about a month ago, we accepted all of the changes in the track changes version
Right.
to create the clean version. And then we went through the clean version, and then we created more track changes in the clean version, which then necessitated us to go back and try to capture all the new track changes in the old track changes. So I'm 100% sure that we didn't catch everything, but we tried really hard, and we're not trying to do anything nefarious. It just happens.
Yeah, it's.
So.
But any of these little Scribner areas, we can always just email you if we
Yes.
see something. too,
Please
'cause you can
do.
just
Yeah.
clean
Yeah.
those up later.
And if you can, please, in the next week, we can get those scrubbed before they go to the town trustees.
And
Okay.
by the way, no matter how many of us look at this, there will still be
There's
some
so
there.
many. Yeah.
Well, good. There's something to do next year. All right. All right. Are you ready to move on to design?
Yes.
This is where. All righty. So. All right. So. We did address, there's been a lot of discussion about density between residential neighborhoods. And this is something that Aaron Bagnall and I discussed a lot. I also consulted with the American Planning Association on how do we do this. And in our land use code in the zoning chapter, we talk about that density transfer and how do we ensure some compatibility between land uses and those different types of density. And some of the information I got from the American Planning Association is if you are trying to buffer too much between, let's say you have a development with 8,000 square foot lots and you're trying to buffer from developments with 10,000 square foot lots or developments with 4,000 square foot lots. When you try to buffer too much, you're actually segregating and you're not creating the a natural flow between neighborhoods. You're actually disconnecting the community. So we don't want to have huge buffers. However, we want to recognize compatibility. So this is something Aaron and I spent several weeks working on this language. We'd leave it alone. We'd come back to it. We discuss it. We discuss it amongst staff. So it isn't something that we took lightly to come up with the density transition language you can see on the second page. So this is the language we did come up with after a lot of thought, and we're not going to come up with an algorithm or some kind of mathematical equation for what that density difference should be. However, we're coming up with it's going to be individually based, and it needs to be based on compatibility. Do you have any questions, comments? Okay, we're gonna move on.
Okay.
No, I do like that, because it's not as rigid, and there's a nice flow. And that, when I read through that, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it was hard because I understand what people want. However, we looked at, well, what if this happens? And we looked at all of these different scenarios, and we consulted folks that are outside of Berthoud, and this is what we arrived at.
And this is just when it's residential to residential.
Yes.
So if it's residential to commercial or residential to ag, there could be different.
Or industrial, we still have those
Okay.
standards. Yep.
Because I get the per square footage of different lot sizes not making much sense, but it is harder when it's a completely different use than.
Yes. Yep. And this also was spurred by a member of the community as well. So again, we wanted to listen to input that we were receiving.
And will the applicant be required to define how they're using this compatibility in their submission?
You bet. This whole design standard chapter, it is part of the intent statement.
Right. Yeah.
So they will have to show how they have met the intent of these design standards. And there are some quantifiable standards in here that they just have to meet.
But this one, for example, they would have to establish compatibility using one of the metrics that you've pointed to here.
Exactly. And this is somewhat objective. So let's say the applicant is saying, I've got 3 feet here and I'm going to put down 1-inch cobble. Gosh, I can't have any plants grow in this. That's going to be my buffer. I think staff will have something to say about that. A lot of, let's see, going on to the statutory EV parking. So again, Bella worked on this and the state has approved all of our language. So this was a quick change. Greater options have been added for park requirements. So our park requirements were difficult to follow because it said here's a pocket park, and if you want a pocket park, you have to have elements A, B, some from D, a little bit from E, and then if you want this park, then you have to choose here and here and here. So what we did is we just started off by saying, here's the required infrastructure for every park, and we added 3 things. You have to have dog waste stations at a ratio of 2 per acre. You have to have some form of public art, and you have to have a sign with the park's name and an address for emergency response. So those are the new bare minimums for any park space in the town of Berthoud. Then we've added, here are the pocket park. And the pocket park then adds on to the bare minimum for every park space. And there are options and flexibility here. Then a neighborhood park, and then a community park. And what we did is we grouped a lot of like things together, like sports courts, ball fields, we grouped them together. We're saying if you want to have multiple tennis courts or multiple ball fields, they can count for multiple elements. Let's say you wanted to have a subdivision that was all about tennis or all about baseball, then you could have multiple of those elements counting for one. And we added more elements to this list as well. And if you're going to have horseshoe or other things like that, you actually have to provide the necessary equipment. So not just put up a horseshoe pit, but you have to have somehow like a locking structure so that people could actually play the game. Usable detention area. So this used to include the area at the bottom of the detention area. And now the usable detention area shall be the area around the detention pond or water quality feature that is a minimum of 1 contiguous acre in size and includes the required park infrastructure listed above with irrigated vegetation or turf or trees or shrubs and any other amenities such as benches or picnic tables and a continuous loop trail to be perpetually maintained by the development, and that can count as one element versus just a detention pond alone counting as that one element without having any improvements to count for functional open space. Then for landscape design, any development or platted, this was in the town code in one of the zoning chapters, but we've just brought it into the subdivision chapters. That development that has 5 or more platted lots have to have a formal landscape design created for it.
And the condition that it be a licensed landscape architect is something that's in there already?
Yep, it's already in there. We just brought it in. The outdoor lighting section, again, the town is trying to meet the International Dark Sky Standards. So the code changes in this section were approved by the International Dark Sky Association. Lot diversity. We have a mix of housing types. And this is something also that Aaron and Chris, the town administrator, and I worked really hard on is the town trustees wanted to see more diversity in neighborhoods. We aren't so concerned about the floor plan. And in our land use code, it talked a lot about you had to have different floor plans. We're not so concerned about the floor plan. We really are more concerned about the outside of the structure, not so much on the inside of the structure. So we did make some changes in here for that mix of housing based on the acreage and what the minimum lot sizes were. So like a minimum of 3 housing diversity types shall be required in residential development containing 20 acres or less. 4, 20 acres or more to 40 acres. 6, between 40 and 80, and a minimum of 8 for over 80 acres. And then the next part of that section talks about, then here are the different types of items you can choose in order to meet those diversity standards, such as row homes or townhomes, paired homes with a common entry, so that could look like a single family home, but it's really a duplex. Or you could have the paired homes that look like paired homes. Live-work units, clustered homes, tiny. There are 4 different types of lot sizes, so less than 30 feet, 40 feet, 50 feet, 40 to 70, and 70 feet wide. Any residential lot can be diversified by providing driveway access with either a rear yard garage placement or an alley-loaded garage placement. Multifamily with a common entry or multifamily with an elevator entry or elevator placement. So we've actually broadened the types of housing that could be used to meet those housing diversity elements. So yes, we are requiring more diversity. However, we're also allowing more types of homes to fit that diversity type.
What's an example of a live-work unit?
So that would be, let's say you were in the downtown, or you had a development in the suburban or the suburban residential or the urban residential, and you wanted to have commercial on the first floor, or a studio or your contractor shop on the first floor, and you wanted to live above it.
Okay. And would that be more like a multifamily, like, like an apartment, or can you do like a single family? How does the zoning?
Yeah, so I've seen it in Broomfield out west. There are a series of these, and there are more like engineers, architects, designers that have their studio on the first floor and they live above, and it is more like in a row house setting. So it is a multifamily product.
I like what you've done with some of the garage stuff, so that you don't end up with a garage that with a house attached, it's minimized on the lot.
Yeah, you don't see a row of garages. Yep. And that's exactly what we heard from the town trustees. That's what we've heard from you all. That's what we've heard, is that we want to get rid of having row and row of garage. Yeah, and Erin, this is her, she's spent a lot of time on this section. Then again, that housing elevation diversity. So you've got the mix, and you have the how you're going to meet that mix. Then within that mix, you have the elevations have to change. Now again, you can have the same floor plan, but what we care about is the elevation. So if you want to have a bungalow next to a Spanish, next to, something else, you can do that, or you can meet that with porches and other elements.
There's a little typo here, sorry.
Yeah, there's
4, housing elevation, diversity type, count 5199, 8, parent housing, different. Sorry, that's because I've been reading everything.
Oh yeah, that is good. Thank you. I got it.
No? Well,
I'm not 100% clear on what elevation means in this
elevation is
context.
facade.
The front facade only.
Well, it could be the front, it could be anything.
Yeah, I would say it's the exterior look of the structure.
Okay, but it doesn't refer to the stories at all.
No.
Okay.
But I mean, it could be the same house with a different elevation, right? They had the same floor plan, it could have, you know,
A
gables
different
in front,
design.
or-
Yeah.
Yeah, the way this is written, that is true.
Okay.
So it's literally whether the gables are like higher or lower.
Or flat.
Or flat,
whatever.
okay.
Yeah, they could have the same exact floor plan.
Okay.
It look
And-
different.
It's meant to work together with the diversity types that Ann went over before this. So ideally, someone that comes in with a really very large site, they're going to have a menu of things to choose from. So you're going to have, you know, small homes and medium-sized homes, and maybe some are paired and some are row homes, and that will help the diversity. But when you get down to the homes that are all in one spot, the residential communities, this will help that diversity.
So it's not like in one section, every home looks identical.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, then, let's see here. Then we get into the non-potable water system and the design of that. And that section was developed by our town's water attorney. So that concludes the design standards section. So between zoning, subdivision and land use and design, that is where the bulk of the changes have occurred, and it should be downhill from now. Are there any questions about design as we move forward? All right. So signs. The only thing that changed in this sign chapter, Ton, working with Brenton Thompson, who is our building permit technician who processes sign permits with Ton, just made a clarification to the monument signs, the number and the placement of those. And Ton, did you want to make any clarification on that, please?
So it's just merely the previous code or our current code says that one monument sign per, I believe, project entry. And so that caused some confusion. It was brought to light with a dental office we have in town who requested a new monument sign. And so it's like, oh, well, project entry is more at a large scale. So like West Side Crossing, which is at the corner of 287 and Mountain Avenue, which is a new development. So one monument sign per entry into that development did make sense. However, when we're looking at a smaller scale project, it created a bit of a challenge. And so we went in and corrected that immediately so that businesses can also take advantage of having a monument sign.
That is the only change to the sign section. Any questions?
Nope.
The Mountain Avenue Overlay District, you will now notice, is 3 pages long because the majority of this section now has been removed and is in the separate Mountain Avenue design guidelines, which we will discuss after this code section. And the reason why we remove that is, again, for the fear of duplicating, of cross-referencing, not catching changes in one, having that conflict. And if we just refer to the guidelines, we are adopting by reference and they mean the same thing. So let's strengthen the standalone guidelines and remove them from code. Any questions there? The Innovation District then, Section 9, amendments are proposed again to be consistent with thresholds and making changes to structures elsewhere in the land use code. Again, exterior walls, additions. If anybody is expanding anything or making a change to an existing building in the Innovation District, which is First Street north of Mountain, south of 287 and on 2nd Street, by a certain threshold. We just want them to, have a great time. Welcome to Berthoud. Please go ahead and use your building that way. However, if they're making substantive changes, we want them to bring their property into compliance and conformance, because that's how we implement the overlay district. Any questions there?
There's a typo.
Oh my gosh. Please help. Where?
On the red line on page 3,
Okay.
section B,
Uh-huh.
the parcels, midway through B, D. It says, it should say the parcels, and then the T must have got moved over by 5. See that?
Nope.
You want to see that?
Oh, that's in the Mountain Avenue overlay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Okay. Nope, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Section 10, Historic Resources. This, Bella is our liaison to the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee. And so Bella worked with HPAC on these proposed changes. And Bella, did you want to talk about these? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here.
Sure. We made some very minor changes. We clarified the difference between major and minor alterations. So we looked at codes from our neighboring jurisdictions and brought our code into something that was very similar to what they have. And that was just about it. Any questions?
What is a historical land surface?
So that would discuss the exterior of the landmarked building. So
Yeah.
the landscaping around it.
How can that be historical?
Well, that's kind of what we're clarifying, what, would be significant to it. I mean, there could be, for example, at the museum and observatory, some of those exterior features are part of the historic designation, and we want to leave the door open for that to be, potentially
There could be a historic tree,
Yes.
it's something that was brought with the pioneers, and we'd
Right.
want to take some efforts to preserve it if we could.
right.
You good there?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Okay, flood overlay. Again, the Colorado Water Conservation Board is the administrator for FEMA on our flood, and there's only one change, and it is because the flood insurance rate study was, the title changed. And so we changed the title. That is the only change. I'm going to assume you have no comments on that. Short-term rental. Oh. If you,
No. Why always me?
the short-term rental section, oopsie. The short-term rental section, the natural medicine section, there are absolutely no changes to those. The marijuana business section, Alicia that's on the phone, and Aaron made some changes to the term businesses that were made to clarify and align with the requirements of state statute. And then reference in the subdivision and land use process and procedures table were also made to align with those changes. Any questions there? Moving on to oil and gas section, section 15. In the definitions section, it was, and again, this is a standalone definition section that is specific to the oil and gas section and the oil and gas practice. And And it was just clarified that disposal wells are prohibited in the town of Berthoud. So you cannot dispose of the water that's used in hydraulic fracturing, or cannot be disposed of in the town of Berthoud.
So do they do that?
They're called injection wells, and they do have disposal well sites throughout the state of Colorado. The town trustees just don't want to have disposal wells in the town, and they inject it into the ground. And then in section 16, the final chapter, and Alicia worked on this. The term tolling, it's like putting a stop to an application. The ability for the town to toll for a wireless communications facility has increased. So now the town can tell a wireless communications facility, hey, we need to stop the clock and we need you to provide us with additional information. Before, it really was the applicant driving, and they could kind of delay and not provide communities with information and then be automatically approved without the town having the ability to toll or stop the clock from ticking, so that we can actually get a good product. And Alicia, did you want to say anything about that?
No, I think you covered it, unless anyone has any questions. That was a good summary.
My impression is that was a result of a regulatory change. Is that correct?
Yes, I don't have the statute off the top of my head, but yes, it was a statutory change. And I can pull that statute if you guys want.
No, that's okay.
So, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, that concludes the description of the substantive changes to the land use code. There are 2 other documents that are going to be open this evening. I could continue to go ahead and talk about those, and then you can open it up for public comment. The discussion really is what you see here on the slide, unless you had any specific questions for Aaron. Specific question. No, it was just, I landed here. You're the closest one. Specific questions. Aaron really led the charge on both of these, listening to the concerns of what you've expressed from our virtual field trips back in January, listening to what the town trustees had concerns with, and taking that insight and putting them into these guidelines. And so we could go ahead and talk about just generally what these guidelines that they've made changes. You have the track changes. I did not give you anything that's clean, so that you could just see what those changes are, because they're pretty clear. And then we can open it up to public comment on all 3 items, and then you just have to vote separately. So we could do that, or we could open it up to public comment on each individual item. Your choice.
I think it makes sense to just open up the public comment on all 3 if
Yep.
nobody else objects.
Okay, so I kind of just said, I did just say, the nature of the changes to the Berthoud Character District Design and Guide and Design Guidelines. They are being presented for amendment. Again, duplicative items from Chapter 30, especially those design chapter items, were removed and placed specifically in the design standards. Likewise, you can see the Mountain Avenue Overlay District guidelines are now only 3 pages. And again, because the majority of that content is a duplicate of the guidelines that are adopted by reference, so it made no sense to have duplicative items. And then it gave us the opportunity to strengthen both sets of guidelines to more accurately reflect the quality of design that the town is looking for. So with that, again, in your packets, the ordinance numbers are a little different because some other land use items or other items got in between now and the next town trustees meeting. So when you are making your motions, if you wouldn't mind just reflecting on these ordinance numbers. And again, I apologize for that. It just sometimes happens where ordinance numbers shift. And that concludes staff's formal presentation tonight. Of course, I am happy to answer questions. If the public has any comments, we can talk about that after public testimony. And of course, Aaron is here to answer specific questions that you have on the Mountain Avenue Overlay District guidelines and then the design guidelines. So,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank
Yep.
you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, staff, for the detailed presentation. We will now open the public hearing for the first reading of proposed changes to Chapter 30 of the Town of Berthoud Municipal Code. If you would like to make a comment, please sign in at the sheet provided. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak.
Just to clarify, are we opening 3 separate hearings, or are we opening the hearing on all 3?
We are opening one single hearing on all 3 documents that were highlighted in the presentation.
All right. My name's Alex Hoyme. I live at 2033 Cuda Court in Berthoud. And I appreciate the constant refining and scrubbing of the code. And I didn't really do all my homework beforehand. I just had some items that I thought were worth pointing out. And I appreciate staff for allowing us to have a collaboration back in May to kind of get our ideas out there. And I hope all these are just taken as just creative or constructive insight on what I heard tonight. Excuse me. One thing that, so I have a few different development properties in town, and a lot of this is just based on things that we've run into in construction or things I've noticed as we've constructed things and different interpretations of the code over the years. First being, along the public streets, there's typically a 10-foot utility easement that runs along there. And then there's a 10-foot setback for the house. Excel requires 5 foot of additional setback from their lines. That's not really listed anywhere. But I think it's kind of alluded to in the verbiage that you used, but I think stating in there that a house should be offset 5 foot from any utility easement running along the street would kind of prevent future issues from coming up. And really it comes up with builders, and I just kind of get thrown into it because I'm seen as the problem solver when things come up. So that's one of them. I was curious on the details of how it works with the platting. If at final plat, if it's an administrative approval, does that mean that, so it would get recorded after that administrative approval after a year? Does the plat get vacated, and is there some sort of process that just needs to be thought through, or just so we understand what happens at that year timeline? I guess you mentioned that there's zero change between prelim and final. Is that only if it's administrative, or if there is is there an allowable change if you still go to hearing? I guess that would be, it's my understanding that if there is a change, it has to go to hearing. And so what is that allowable change to where you don't have to go back through prelim plat hearings? I would assume that we can resubmit any projects that are in process with these new guidelines as they're laid out, even though they're not formally approved yet. So just kind of clarification on that. On the front setbacks to the garage, I noticed that the garage needs to be offset from the front of the house, and then Lucas has a standard where you have to be 20 foot from the sidewalk, which is usually the right-of-way line. But if that house could extend into the 20 feet, like if the house setback could be 15 foot, and then the garage is at 20 foot, that, like when that was the interpretation of the code in our first phase, we felt it made for a very diverse frontage. And then when we went all to 20 feet, it's just this line of houses at 20 feet. And so if there is a way to alternate that, that would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Hoime. Sorry, we are at time.
All right.
This is our policy. Yeah, I appreciate your patience.
All right, question, I mean, can you get in touch with the staff if you have further question? Because I think these are, I mean, these are questions that are too detailed for us to, and staff is much better to analyze that.
I plan to. I just wanted to. I don't know the sequence of things, and
Yeah, that's the reason why I'm asking if it's possible. So,
incorporated. So I will call.
But thank you for bringing details.
Yes, thank you so much.
Aha.
Hello. My name is Janine Cage. How are you today? Thank you for having me up here. I'm very new at what I'm doing, so thank you. Why did the zoning board reject the new bakery application? Because they had too many loafing requirements. I just had to throw a little joke in there, right? Lighten the mood. So I am interested in this property at 730 6th Street. It's the Little White Church that is currently the Church of Christ. And as the zoning is right now, I would not be able to use it as an event center. And that is what I would be proposing for using it as, to rehabilitate it. And if you've ever seen it in person, you probably know that it is just a beautiful structure, or it was at one point. And I would really like to refurbish it, and just bring it back to its original glory, and just make it an asset to the town of Berthoud, because it would draw people from all over. We're 45 minutes away from Denver. We're 45 minutes away from Estes Park and Fort Collins and just everywhere. So we can boast so many good things, and it would be an asset to bring people here and to continue with the historic charm and the character of Berthoud, because I live in Longmont, but I am very involved in the Berthoud community. My daughter's in Girl Scouts here. I'm in the writing club at the library, and I've got so many friends that live here, and I want to live here someday, just because it's just a wonderful place to be, and the community is just beautiful. So it would be really a wonderful place to use as something that would be an asset to the Berthoud community, which this new revision would allow for. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We only have 2 people signed up. If anyone else would like to give public comment, now is your opportunity. I see someone shifting in their seat. I've got the gavel,
Just
Tiffany.
visiting.
Okay. All right. Well, then, if the public hearing has ended, then we will close this session. Thank you very much for your comments. This now leads to the deliberation portion of the hearing, where the Planning Commission will deliberate on the presentation and the public comment and propose any motions. So, any commissioners want to give some initial thoughts, ask follow-up questions of staff?
No, I mean, I like the idea of kind of cleaning this up, streamlining it, making it a little bit easier to get through. I mean, I think there was a lot of work put into this, and I really appreciate the summary. The summary that Ann gave was
Yeah.
huge. There was a lot of reading.
And it's difficult to distill that
Yeah.
amount of information
Yes.
into something
And then
more
try to understand where,
compact.
like where you took certain things out of certain areas and then put them in other areas because they were already duplicated. I mean, I think that's great. Yeah,
No,
it
that's,
was a
that's
tremendous amount of work.
yeah, that's awesome because you think, okay, oh, duplicated, so I remove it there. Oh yeah, but then the reference and blah blah blah. I'm sure it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you to everybody who worked on this. I know the thousands of hours that you guys have all put in over the past year. And I think you've done just an amazing job of listening to all of the different stakeholders. Certainly everything that we've talked about over the past year has been reflected in these changes. It'll never be perfect. We'll always find little things, but you have just done truly an amazing job. As somebody who's done this once upon a time, I know how hard this work was. So thank you.
To that end of listening to the stakeholders, there were a few questions from Mr. Hoyme that we might be able to address tonight. The first being utility setbacks. So I don't know if someone from staff, whether that's Ann or someone else, wants to. It's also, you know, it sounds like there will be later conversations between you and Mr. Hoyme, so maybe you'll need time to look in the code in more detail, but if you have answers.
So I could provide some clarification. So utilities, whether wet or dry, so that's either your natural gas, electricity, fiber optic, or water. Usually dry utilities, so utilities are typically placed within a utility easement. And so that easement, usually the width of the easement is then required by the utility provider. So there's an average width that is typically, and so I believe that's what Mr. Hoyme was mentioning, is that those easements have a standard width. And then we don't, our development code does not have a setback requirement from easements. The requirement is that no structure can be placed within an easement. So setbacks are from a property line, so building minimum setbacks. But again, to clarify, we don't have setbacks from an easement.
Okay.
So if a utility provider then wants additional space or building setback from their easement, that's not something I'm familiar with, and that would be a bit odd, and so likely they should probably request a larger easement. But that would be their requirements, not the town's.
Not the town's.
But would that impact the setbacks? To me, that would impact the setbacks, wouldn't it?
No, so you do have scenarios where you may have a property line and then you have an easement that's just in the inside of the property line, and say the side setback is a minimum of 5 per our development code, but the easement's 10 feet wide. Yes, then the building has to be set back 10 feet from the property line because it can't be within that easement. So that's that unique dynamic there. So that easement, if it is wider, would be that overriding. It's the more restrictive regulation, and therefore it applies.
Okay, thanks. I think there was an additional question about the plat getting vacated after a year after the final plat.
Sure. So, and again, Alex, call me and we can walk through this. So right now, what we're giving options. And the option is if the final plat adheres to the preliminary plat really precisely, then the developer can have that administrative final plat, and that final plat can be effective for 1 year, and you can have a 1-year extension can be granted, but after that 2 years, then in essence, that final plat could be called to be vacated. So again, it is a risk if you don't request that vesting. However, that's the best that we could do per our attorney team, looking at what what state statutes require for vesting of platting and that site-specific development plan. So it's good for a year if you choose the administrative process, and you can ask for a 1-year extension. So it could be good for 2 years, but no vesting. Then if you go for, let's say that something had to change, going from 80 to 100% construction drawings, and something drastic had to change, who knows what that is? We could make it all up all night long. The developer could then make a decision to go back and amend the preliminary plat and hope to go to administrative final plat, or they could go to a hearing for the final plat then, just to the town board of trustees, because a drastic change did occur, no fault of their own. It could be something that they discovered when doing those final engineering. And then that would then be vested for 3 years. Did that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then your other changes about Lucas and front setbacks and everything, it's almost 9 and that's when my brain turns off. So let's have a conversation about that.
Right. Yeah, I was just making sure that I threw things out in this hearing if this was kind of my final change.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what it's for. Thank you.
And then as far as Ms. Cage is concerned, she's right now, a place of assembly is not allowed. However, Manager Hillenbrand and Planner Manzo really did work hard at even evaluating our existing places of assembly that are in town.
What is the current zoning for that?
So the property is currently zoned R1, which is
Okay.
single family residential.
Yes. Okay. And so a congregation that exists on R1 property, that's okay? That,
So this is where it's a bit tricky. So currently it's places of assembly is how it's defined in our code, which is religious assembly. And so it's all religious related.
Yeah.
And so you're starting to see municipalities, jurisdictions kind of removing that religious component, and it broadens it so that a place of assembly could be religious assembly of any variety, but it could also be event centers that maybe don't have a religious affiliation, but still host, say, weddings or baby showers or whatever it may be. So what's unique about our current definition is that, yes, places of assembly are not allowed within the R1 zone district. And we have neighborhood, and then we have large scale, big scale, big. And so technically that church would be a non-conforming use under our current regulations, and it really allows no flexibility in this scenario when the church switches hands. If somebody wants to do something different with it or slightly different, it really kind of pigeonholes it to what it is. Or they have to go through a rezone process, which per our comprehensive plan likely wouldn't work. And so it just kind of leaves it in this place of either you're a church or you're nothing.
but I
And
mean,
to just
even the church is non-conforming, right?
The church is non-conforming.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, you fixed that in the
That's-
proposed
yes.
code amendments.
So yes, Bella and I did
Okay.
a lot of looking at what kind of churches we currently have in town, what their sizes are, what zone districts they're in. Then we compared them to other communities to see how they define it. And so we now have 3 sizes, places of assembly. We don't call them, you can of course be a religious affiliate, but it's not required. So it can be an event center. We have neighborhood, medium, and large.
Yes.
I think that's how they're defined. But it's those 3, and it's based on square footage. So now this offers the ability to have a place of assembly within the R1 zone district up to a specific size, which would allow this church. So it's not in this funky position, and could be adapted to new use, but still maintain the wonderful charm that is that historic resource.
And there's no distinction between it being a commercial place of assembly versus whatever you would classify
That's
a
correct. There's
church
no-
assembly as.
That's right.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Thank you for that clarification.
Can I ask for one clarification on your last slide? When we make a motion, are you looking for us to say, for instance, we move to recommend approval of ordinance 1367 to the town? I mean, you had some ordinance numbers in there you seem to want us to use. I want to make sure that
Oh, right.
when we get to entertaining motions,
I
we
got
do it
2
the
out of
right
3.
way.
Yeah.
I know, I got 1367, then 1369, and
Yes.
1368 in the
Thank
order of our
you.
sheets. But I want to make sure we do that right.
So chapter 30, the land development code, is ordinance 1367 now. The design guidelines are ordinance 1368. And the Mountain Avenue Overlay District is ordinance 1369.
Okay. Do you have further comments from the planning commission or deliberation or? Yes. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion. Or 3.
I'll do the first. I move to recommend approval of ordinance 1367 to the Town Board of Trustees of the proposed amendments to the Berthoud Land Use Code to repeal and replace Chapter 30 of the Berthoud Municipal Code in its entirety as presented by staff.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a second. Would we please take the roll?
Commissioner Sigmund,
Yes.
Commissioner Semidalis,
Yes.
Commissioner Pond,
Yes.
Commissioner Filio,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffmans,
Yes.
Vice Chair Smith.
Yes. And thank you, Belle. I'm not going to try to remember everyone's last names on the spot, so I'm just ducking that responsibility. Thank you. Okay, so as discussed prior to the public hearing was covering both the Chapter 30 edits as well as the design guides and Mountain Avenue corridor and signage plan. So those are now also eligible for motion.
So we can go ahead and I move to recommend approval for ordinance 1368 to the Town Board of Trustees of the proposed amendments to the Town of Berthoud Charter District, guide and design guidelines as presented by staff.
Do you have a motion?
I second that motion.
And a second?
I'll take the roll. Commissioner Sigmund,
Yes.
Commissioner Semidalis,
Yes.
Commissioner Pond,
Yes.
Commissioner Filio,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffmans,
Yes.
Vice Chair Smith.
Yes. Okay. The last item for our consideration is the Berthoud Avenue corridor design and signage plan.
I move to recommend approval for ordinance 1369 to the Town Board of Trustees of the proposed amendments to the Town of Berthoud Mountain Avenue corridor design and signage plan as presented by staff.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay. We'll take the roll.
Commissioner Filio,
Yes.
Commissioner Sigmund,
Yes.
Commissioner Semidalis,
Yes.
Commissioner Pond,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffmans,
Yes.
Vice Chair Smith.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to the staff once again for much hard work over the last year. I feel like we should have like fireworks.
Really, truly, Aaron and our attorneys, Bella and Ton, did a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of review of other communities, what they do to make sure that, you know, we want to be in somewhat alignment. We don't want to be too onerous. However, sometimes reflecting on what other communities do help us also to make plans for what's best for Berthoud. And gosh, I mean, Aaron, even at the last minute, the day before the packets were due, was making last minute changes. So hats off and thanks to it was a huge team undertaking, so couldn't have been done without everybody working together.
Awesome.
And I do have to say that Anne is not taking enough credit, so I need to say that on the record, is that she was the master on this and spent I don't know how many trillions of hours. So really, she also deserves a huge applause.
Well, thank you. We greatly appreciate it. Okay. I think now the next item on the agenda is staff reports. So I think we can move on to that section. And the planning parts are behind us.
Yeah, so I don't know if I reported on this last time, but
Thank you all.
the character district change from Mountain Avenue overlay was approved by the town board of trustees the way you all made the suggestion. So that did occur. And then at our October 23rd meeting, you will be getting a work session by Bella on tree strips. It will not be X-rated, but it will be on tree strips. So we will be talking about that, and we'll be talking about state legislation that is mandating right now for certain areas to have non-essential turf. However, these changes will be coming for residential areas as well. So how do we look ahead to our landscape design guidelines, which Aaron was the leader for that process as well about 18 months ago. So we'll be needing to start looking at those again and kind of getting ahead of the curve and just going ahead and just doing it. So we're going to start looking at that with the tree strip teas. On the 23rd, we will need that comic relief. And then Ton is working with some developers to hopefully get them to that public hearing. We have a couple that are so close, and I just don't know if we're going to get there. But we have a couple that are very, very close.
All right.
And if we don't have one on December 9th, if we do not have a public hearing that night would have been our potluck. We will just go out to dinner and not have to feel the rush to get back here for a meeting. We will go out and have a nice dinner together.
Awesome.
See, now you have us.
Hey, you're not in the commission anymore.
You might want to come back in town.
Just for that.
Yeah,
That's what happens when you move on up.
And I think that's it.
What's going on with the old pharmacy? I noticed a lot of construction
Yeah.
out there.
We all are in
Yeah.
suspense.
We are too. No, we don't know. We don't know. We do know that the property owner is doing a very particular job about the renovation. Bella went down and compared the brick colors, and he was very open about having the town and the museum.
He's very active in contacting the Historical Society and the museum's director and maintaining the historic integrity of the building, and we're excited to see how it turns out once the renovations are.
So you have no idea what he's planning on doing?
That's correct.
We know the.
Well, I would say there's
Building permit.
Well, yeah, for clarification, they do have a building permit. We did review a site plan for the property that includes the facade and what the facade looks like. We know all that. Yes, that has gone through the approval process.
Okay.
What we don't know is the proposed uses, so the interior uses at this time. Our understanding is he doesn't have tenants, and we suspect there'll be 2, maybe 3. But that's what Ann is meaning, is that we don't know what businesses are going there.
Not that we
Yeah.
don't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
We know what he's doing.
But you anticipate there would be multiple businesses.
He has implied that he would like to create three units.
I mean, it's a big space.
But
you know, a lot of that depends on who the users are and what their needs are. So they'll need to come back in then for additional site plan review once he has tenants.
So he's gonna do 3 units to be rented or what? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He'll remain the primary owner and then rent the spaces.
We're excited because it appears his building permit, he's done a very nice job. He went to Historic Preservation Committee, which also had to go to the Town Board of Trustees for approval because it was a major renovation. Though the work that he is illustrating being done and the amount of care that he is taking, it's going to be a very nice renovation and in addition to the context of that historic block in downtown. So we're very excited, and then we're excited to see who his tenants will be.
All right. Good. Yeah. Okay. Well, that
Okay.
was a good meeting.
Any other updates from commissioners? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
And I second.
All right. All right, I move to adjourn the planning commission meeting at 8:15 p.m.
Okay, I got a little bit of a problem.
Hey, Mark, you can still come with us. Yeah.